pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This meeting of the East Troy School District Board of Education and all other meetings of the board are open to the public in compliance with state statute. Notice of the meeting has been sent to the media and/or has been publicly posted in an attempt to make the citizens of the district aware of the time, place, and agenda of this meeting.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as posted.
Second. Okay, any discussion on the agenda?
Oh.
All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I'd also like
Can
to
you,
make
wait, pause a second. Thank you. Sorry, I had lost my pen. So
Oh,
that was Jessica Fuchs, and who was the second?
Bob.
And Bob, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put together now.
Continue. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the November 11th, 2019 regular board meeting.
I'll second that as well. All right. Any discussion or comments on the meeting minutes? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is public participation. Is there anybody that would like to speak tonight? All right. We'll move on to the financial report.
All right. At this time, I move the approval of November 2019 payments in the amount of $1,701,412.92 and receipts in the amount of $238,109.24 as reflected on the attached financial statement.
I'll second. All right, discussion. Kat, do you have anything you want to cover?
No, it's pretty straightforward month,
Yeah.
so no comments.
Anybody
But if you have any questions.
No, pretty straightforward. Okay. All right, all in favor of approval of the financial report, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to the discussion action items. First one, we're giving Silas a break tonight, is the student representative report.
Sorry for leaving me off guard there, so.
All right, so as December rolls around, girls and boys basketball has are officially in season. And as of last night, or Saturday, AJ Vukovic broke the all-time scoring record for points, surpassing Brett Miller by 3 points, scoring 1,667. And boys wrestling is also underway. There is a high school band concert tonight at 7, and there was a middle school and high school choir concert yesterday at the high school.
Okay.
It's a great choir concert, yes. Phenomenal job. Yeah, the transitions and just all the kids from middle school to high school is incredible.
Nicely done.
All right, thank you, Silas.
Thanks, Seth.
Next item, presentation of service project, Trojan Battle Bags by the FCCLA.
So hi, I'm Sarah Manglis. I'm the president of FCCLA. So we're just here to talk to you today about Trojan Battle Bags. So basically what we have found out was at the end of each school year, the students of East Troy have to take this survey called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. So basically what we found out was that 28% of the high school students that took that survey last year said that they go home and they're hungry. There's just not enough food at their house. And then that number gets even higher to a 40% when you ask the middle schoolers that same question. So what we were planning on doing was introducing the Trojan Battle Bag.
So I have the Family Foods and Society classes, and I'm also the advisor of FCCLA. So I brought this statistic, which we got at a staff meeting, to both groups, and both were like, we have to do something. It was amazing, the timing, because it fit right into a unit in Family Foods and Society that we do on property. And so we watched a documentary that's listed there. It's a Frontline documentary, just poverty in the United States. And so my students in my class and the students in FCCLA were like, we have to do something. So it really sparked this idea. The thing I wanted to note is that everything that you're seeing in here was completely student-driven. I just stood off to the side. So the name Trojan Battle Bags, they came up with after a lot of discussion and a lot of work. And then what are we going to do? And the whole idea was completely driven by students in both groups.
All right, and then to kind of start this, what we did was we thought that we would have the Trojan Battle Bags so that they would be available for the students on a Friday afternoon so that they could take them home before the weekends. But then we also thought it would be nice to have them before school breaks. So for instance, we were planning on having another round of Trojan Battle Bags before this upcoming winter break. But just as a little something extra to put in those bags, Mrs. Lewis was thinking that it'd be kind of like a cute, fun thing to do for her family foods and society class to make like Christmas cookies to also put in the bag, just because that's, you know, kind of cute and festive and stuff. And then we would also like that to be hopefully available for the students to have all year round, also along with over summer break as well. And then for where we were having these Trojan Battle Bags available for students, so with the first round we had them so that they were in the high school counseling office, but we were kind of hoping to expand that to a district-wide program so that we could bring that over to the middle school, for instance, because they did have a higher percentage than us, like 40%, so it'd be kind of nice if they could like come over and just even have them at the middle school so that they could take the bags as well. And then, so we started out by having the Trojan Battle Bags as like paper grocery bags, but we thought that that was maybe a little flawed because maybe it was a little too obvious, like there was food in those bags, so maybe students just didn't want to take them. So we thought that it would be nice if we could switch over to athletic bags so that maybe it wasn't so obvious that there's food inside those bags. And then also we know that students just don't need food, but they also need things like clothing and personal hygiene products. So we thought that it'd be nice if we could kind of turn those Trojan Battle Bags into kind of like a shopping thing so that maybe we could ask community members if they want to like donate like things like that as well, like the clothing and personal hygiene things. And so how we kind of got this started was FCCLA along with Mrs. Lewis's Family Food and Society students, we held together a little food drive from Monday, November 18th to Friday, November 22nd. And so within that time period, we had enough food to fill 35 of the Trojan Battle Bags, which was really awesome. And then how we would like to kind of expand this into the community is that we were thinking that the local like East Troy community members, along with like business owners, would kind of like to help support this program. So we were thinking that we could ask some local businesses if we could put like money donation boxes like in their businesses. So for example, we could put like a money box like at Square Roots, like on the square and stuff like that. And also like food donation boxes, so we could have like a little food bin over at Frank's and just kind of see if people would like to donate to that. And then also just along with kind of like spreading the word by like flyers and letters and stuff like that to community members, because when we were like kind of telling people at the high school about it, Mrs. Lewis told one of the teachers over there, her name is Mrs. Blusick, and what she did is she went home and she told her husband about it, and they went grocery shopping that night, and they put together like 5 of their own Trojan Battle Bags, which was also just really like sweet and awesome of them to do. So that's just kind of how we want to expand that. And then for the future, I don't know if you want to say that.
There's a couple different things. So since we started the program, it is still based out of our counseling office, so kids can come and go. You can grab a whole grocery bag and we kind of have pictures there. But we also have it kind of a free shopping, so they can come in for lunch if they want and grab a mac and cheese and make it, or however it works. So you can get it kind of a grab and go type thing, take some things home. We have expanded a little bit to the middle school because we have some 8th graders coming over for the last part of the day. They also come because they have siblings at the high school and are aware, so they come and they grab what they need as well. I've packed several bags and bring them over to the middle school, so the middle school has food for kids to take home as well. So we are starting to expand it a little bit, which is great. So they have the opportunity to take a grocery bag if they want, or just kind of take that grab and go. And then hopefully, kind of like we have those lending libraries or the free book libraries throughout we love to kind of put some houses out there of food, of what you do with it. We like to get those up in the community as well and kind of dovetail off that living library philosophy.
So overall, today, we just wanted to present it to you that we're doing it, and we would like to continue with your approval, and we would definitely like to expand into the community. We know that East Troy is a fantastic place to live where people are always willing to help each other. So I think if we can expand it and just tell people this is what we're doing and why we're doing it, we'll have more than enough donations to keep it going for far into the future.
And what I will say, echoing with at least the high school staff, because that's where we are with it right now, is we sent out before Thanksgiving a letter, like a skyward announcement to the high school parents saying, hey, this is what's going on. A lot of the teachers came and had said, if they can't make it during school hours or their kids don't want to take it, I'll leave them after hours. So staff is on board, willing to meet. And several parents have contacted, say, hey, can we meet? And I've met them. And so another couple staff met them afterwards and provide them the groceries in a box so nobody knows why they're coming to the high school and take some. And so the support from the staff has been amazing as well.
Sounds great.
Thank you, guys. Love it.
Appreciate you coming in tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next item is a resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limit by $1.6 million per year for 5 years for non-recurring purposes.
Yeah, the necessary paperwork from council is in your packet. So obviously, the board has taken quite some time to deliberate and have discussions in regards to how we got here. So tonight is your guys' final discussion on whether or not, if you want to elect to approve of this resolution, we would ask if you do to obviously read the language verbatim by council as it would be represented in the ballot itself. And then if that were to be approved tonight, the second resolution, which is B, which would be your next agenda item, and that is your approving of, obviously, the referendum on election on the question of the approval of the resolution to go to the local community to vote on this exceeding the revenue limit by 1.6 million. So with that, primarily the question I made before you is, does the board want to proceed with a resolution to authorize the district to exceed the revenue limits by 1.6 million? If you have any specific questions, I mean, we've been working on it for the last 18 months or so, but if you have specific questions in regards to the process of how we got here, or if we want to explain it to anybody, I think the big things that I could review quickly would be, please take the floor, would be, I think, if I could narrow it in, I'd say, I think we've worked diligently for quite some time to show, well, without outside 18 months, that the district itself has been worked diligently to try to be financially responsible. And through that financial responsibility, we've balanced our budget each and every year. I think that's sometimes something that gets stated that people don't understand. So I want that stressed, that we do balance our budget each and every year. Some districts do not. That's why they may have to go into a fund balance. We have been able to balance our budget each and every year. With that being said, though, over the course of the last 13 years, we've had to reduce $7.8 million in our district from a variety of ways, right? A variety of ways, from health insurance to different providers, different plan designs, which affect premiums, deductibles, nothing out of the ordinary from other districts too, or from individuals, to personnel. So we've restructured a lot of personnel. There was a time in our district. We have not had to do it recently due to the fact that we wanted to try and not make that who we were. But at one point in time, I recall that we had a few years, if you recall, that we were trying to fill positions oftentimes with someone at 70% or less due to the fact that we were trying to fill them with part-time FTE status so we would not have to pay the insurance and we would just only be covering 70% of salary. Though that was not something that we desired to do, but it was something that we felt we needed to do to maintain enough professionals to continue to operate in a thorough capacity, but unfortunately to help offset some of the structural deficits during those years. discussions and the direction we went. Since then, we've tried to reestablish a lot of those part-time FTEs to full-time status if we've been able to, and if the need presented itself. We didn't do it without the need presenting itself. But anyways, from a standpoint, I think that demonstrates a lot of the financial responsibility. You know, we've talked for quite some time that we want to control debt, we want to control expenses in our district. I think we've represented that. But we've also have said quite often we need to continue to invest properly. We've done that by trying to address it through impact needs through a regular budgeting process. But now came the time where we start to have some serious dialogue about, do we believe we can continue to do that without asking the community for some assistance within the budget? I think we've seen a lot of other surrounding districts going to operational referendums, some for quite some time. Some are going on to their second and third 5-year trends. Some are going to recurrings, where they're no longer asking for a non-recurring of a 3 or 5-year window, due to the fact they don't, some districts are feeling nothing's really changing at the state level from a standpoint of funding. And it's been said quite some time since revenue caps have been in existence in '93, that some districts are saying, look, we're not going to rely upon what it means 5 years from now. We're going to ask for the amount we think and go for it. So we've seen those shifts and those transitions. I think one of the things that this board has had a challenge for quite some time, and that is how do we stay providing a quality education for our kids, not wanting to necessarily always view education as a competitive environment against other districts, but the reality is it is, with enrollment, open enrollments, and other venues for education to be offered now. And how do we continue to be a high-quality, competitive educational institution for our kids who currently go here and for kids who would consider going here, in the same breath of when other districts may be going operational to exceed their revenue limits to either maintain their programming or increase their programming. And then for us to be facing structural deficits each year. So I think those were the challenges. And that's the budget side. Now, on the other flip side of it, I would say that the board has done a thorough job on the process. And that is looking at those challenges and saying, not just coming forth with a recommendation yourself or from administration themselves. You guys did a very thorough job, I believe, in a while ago in doing a survey to the community and saying, let's get some feedback from the community. Let's talk to them about some of our challenges. And let's find out what the community thinks possibly are areas of focus points and areas in which they may be willing to increase the tax rate, the tax levy, from a standpoint of impact and what that level would be, what's doable. From that survey, and I understand it's only a survey, and it's only a small populace of people in response, but that survey indicated pretty clearly areas that the community was willing to allow this board to consider for, I think, additional assistance. And I think they indicated pretty clearly in that survey where kind of a plateau line was of don't go above this line, due to the fact that it probably is not something that we most likely will consider supporting at that time. At that point in time, you asked the administration to go back and form an ad hoc committee, which was formed. The ad hoc committee met for numerous months, going over numerous pieces of information, facilitated by Kathy, with all administration team being there, 2 board members being representative on that committee. The ad hoc committee came back with a recommendation. That recommendation was not to exceed a $98 impact on a $100,000 home, due to the fact of the survey. They thought it was really important to follow the responses of the survey. Yet they were very strongly, I think, the ad hoc represented and demonstrated they understood some of the challenges. And that $98 does not cover our complete structural deficits that are projected, nor does it cover our complete maintenance projects that are projected that have been deferred, due to the fact that we were trying to defer some maintenance so we would stay away from the classrooms and other areas in our buildings. So I think they understood very clearly, like, this is not resolved
all of your issues and challenges. We understand that. We know that your budget process will still need to occur. You'll still need to make tough recommendations to the board, and the board will still need to make tough decisions. But it'll at least support and assist and help to not have to be as large of deficits. From that, we came back to you guys and showed you different ways in which the 1.6 million could be utilized. And obviously we said in the first year, in fact it's a smaller structural deficit, still fairly significant, but we said we could address some of that structural deficit with some of the 1.6, and we would put a majority of the 1.6 toward maintenance in the first year. After that, maintenance would each year go down slightly of what we're utilizing it for, and we put more toward the structural deficit each year to help offset the two. Again, I want to reiterate to everybody, if this were to be approved to go to the voters, with our current projections and our current numbers now and our budget the way it is, we still would have deficits. I think that's really important so people I don't want people thinking if they supported something that doesn't mean things would look exactly the same. They would not. We still would not be able to address every single component. And there's just a lot of unknown variables there. What does insurance come in at, right? If insurance comes in really well for us, that could have a positive impact that we don't have as large a structural deficit. If it comes in at 16% like it did last year, that obviously is going to be a huge issue when we're projecting 8 each and every year. It doubles our structural deficit. So those are the components from that standpoint. And so when I finally, I guess to wrap it up, it comes down to needs, right? So fiscal responsibility, we believe we've demonstrated up to this point in time. You've utilized a great process, and then you had to look at your needs. And the needs were identified clearly from a standpoint of maintenance needs, a standpoint of operational needs, still a standpoint of some safety and security needs that we want to always continue to upgrade and do. So I think those are, and some facility improvements. Those were the areas of needs that were identified that we believe we still need to consider and address through this. There will be a lot of prioritizing going on. Even if this were to be approved, there's going to still be a lot of prioritizing on all those various needs of when and what gets addressed. No doubt about it. And then obviously that is what has led us to this consideration of a solution by the board. That's a recap.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions, comments at this point? One comment that I heard while I was getting coffee this week, just so we can clarify for the record, there was a discussion going on in line about the Palmyra Eagle dissolution and what does this mean. And obviously there's still a great deal to be decided in that district. And the question was, well, if Palmyra Eagle does fully dissolve and we end up getting the students that we have proposed that we could serve very well, does that fundamentally change anything? And the answer that I had suggested with the follow-up promise was, no, fundamentally it doesn't change anything, but I think that's a question we're probably going to get, especially if the dissolution goes through, and I guess, yeah, are we comfortable that that's a safe answer? That even if we were to see some students enter the district, it would not fundamentally change things. The only thing that would really fundamentally change the status of this referendum is if something were to happen in Madison and they would completely retool the funding formula.
I think that's a fair statement to make.
Okay, thank you.
And as all of us know, I apologize if people are not well versed in the dissolution, please go on our webpage. I've sent out some information on it, and on our webpage, we've shared the recent letter from the board on the 25th of November that went to the School District Boundary Appeals Board that was written by the school board itself. We have been attending almost every Thursday night over at Palmyra Eagle, I shouldn't say Thursday night, Thursday afternoons through Thursday night in regards to the dissolution process. So they are now at a point where they're no longer taking testimonies. No more presentations are being done by any surrounding districts. And so now the SDBAB is determining
whether or not are they going to affirm the dissolution or deny the dissolution. It is a complicated process. If you've been there, you'll realize, I think, the difficulty they're having with it, due to the fact it impacts not only Palmyra Eagle, but it impacts every other surrounding district. Every surrounding district had to give a presentation. Our board gave a presentation, and our board has outlined a small portion of area in which we would like them to only consider if they were to actually go forward with the dissolution. It's a very small portion of the area, due to the fact of where we feel kids reside that are coming to East Troy School District, where our buses go, and to look out for the students of Palmyra as well as East Troy. I mean, and to look out for our financial stability still, with so many unknowns due to the fact, obviously, things would get proportionate from the standpoint of whatever would be received. You're also receiving proportionally then possibly the debt in that district. So it's really important to understand and balance that. And since no district in the state of Wisconsin has gotten to this point ever, it's unknown territory. It's uncharted. There have been discussions of dissolution, but they're literally, Palmyra Eagles, the farthest of any district ever been in this process. I will state it for the record. I worry about if we stated this at the last meeting. I understand the significance and the difficulty of that decision by the SDBAB, but we told them, please consider what precedents you're setting in your decision too, because there's going to be precedent setting here. And I'm not saying it makes their job any easier, but there will be precedent setting. I will state it. I mean, it was open. Everybody who was there heard it. When all the districts or surrounding districts had to present, there was a district, a very good district in the perception of a lot of people around this area that got up presented. And I think they are a solid district. And I don't think that's just a perception. I believe the data represents it. And they stated very clearly, because they had failed a referendum last April, they said to the SDBAB, that is, my witness was right there, it was a drop the mic moment, a sad drop the mic. They stated, we are asking the SDBAB to not provide any kids from Palmyra Eagle to our district, because they said it would be very unjust and unfair for those kids to possibly have to transfer again in their high school career if our district does not pass a referendum, because we believe we will be going down that road. That's pretty accurate, isn't that? That's exactly right. And it would not have been a district I ever would have, off the record, thought. But with their last failed referendum, I believe that. I think they said that in the last year, because of that, it had to reduce 30 staff members. And they do not have a full-time guidance counselor in their district any longer in a building. They have a full-time guidance counselor, but not one full-time guidance counselor in one building any longer. And they don't have a social worker in the entire district any longer. In a district larger than ours. So I think, this is what we talked to SDBAB about. Understand your decision. I don't know if they elect not to dissolve Palmyra, what the right answer is after that. Because it'll take another probably committee to determine, well, now what? Because Palmyra literally will not have the dollars to operate their educational institution after 1 year. I mean, they will not have fund balance left. Yeah, it'll be negative school year. It'll be negative. So there's no dollars to operate. So, I think those are all the things. I mean, Bob, if you don't mind, could I read the letter from you guys to the group? Would that be all right? I think that kind of explains kind of a lot too. So this was a letter written by the school board, our school board, to the SDBAB. It's a reiteration of the presentation that was done prior to this letter. Dear SDBAB, which stands for School District Boundary Appeals Board, thank you for the opportunity to lead a 30-minute presentation on the 21st of November 2019 at the Palmyra Eagle High School Middle School. As the smallest school district bordering the Palmyra Eagle Area School District, we first want to reiterate how truly saddened we are for the community, staff, and children of Palmyra Eagle. As stated in our presentation, we are disheartened that insufficient funding mechanisms
based on outdated formulas and laws have brought us all to this point. This letter serves to recap our presentation and to hopefully assist the SDBAB in making the difficult decisions it must make. In the end, we hope that whatever the decision, you can keep the well-being of the students of the Palmyra Eagle School District at the forefront of your analysis and ensure all surrounding districts' organizational health will not be harmed in the short or long run. Should the decision be to apportion a section of the PASD to East Troy, please note the following, and these were things we stressed to them during our presentation. We are committed to providing transportation to the students currently of Palmyra Eagle Area School District that would become East Troy residents and anticipate the ability to do so using a combination of extended routes and additional routes. We would anticipate A, receiving buses currently used by PASD to cover those new routes as part of the asset transfer and dissolution, and B, the opportunity to hire drivers currently employed by PASD as needed to fill those routes. We currently operate our own fleet of buses and manage transportation in-house. This provides us with the flexibility to manage route changes and work with residents in any PASD territory to develop the best transportation arrangement possible. Please see the attached sheet, which represents the East Troy Community School District's boundaries and campus. We believe this map represents where reasonable travel times could occur. It also represents the only areas of PASD that East Troy Community School District could have transferred within a boundary reorganization that would not harm the immediate and long-term sustainability of our district. And just because we're offering that does not mean they have to accept it. They could give us whatever they desire and say, no, this is what we've elected. They could in the end say all 7 surrounding districts, even though some of you say you want to be part of it at all, some of you only want a small, we're going to divide this amongst the 7 and provide it. Right now they're looking at 4 options which we can share later if people are interested. Sorry, lost my spot. The map indicates our current pupil maximum times on the bus. This is not solely travel time, but full bus time. And additional area students in the northwest boundary of East Troy contemplating what we view as reasonable assignment of PASD territory to East Troy as part of your decision. These travel times incorporate this territory related to our current transportation, geographical area of the East Troy campus, and current open enrollment students. If dissolution were to be approved and reorganization of boundaries established, we believe the area designated yellow and or orange, and that map is on the webpage if you want to see what we designated, as shared during the presentation, would be the most reasonable portion to assign to East Troy, without causing undue harm to our district, while still providing for the educational opportunities to PASD students deserve. As noted during our discussion, many of these considerations are based on a significant amount of unknown variables at this point in time. And that literally is what has everybody so concerned in all districts, because we're trying to resolve something that nobody knows how to process. And nobody can give definitive answers, not even formulas, to what would occur if provided students or land. We also wanted to ensure clarity to the statement of East Troy recommends that it receive a portion of the PE territory, including which territory or territories we believe are the only viable options for our district. As commented on after a follow-up question from the SDBAB, East Troy, based on our current capacity availability, with the potential to accommodate 350 more students district-wide, would not entertain keeping any schools in PASD open if they were within any restructuring of the boundaries. We were asked that point blank that night by the board, by the School District Boundary Appeals Board. If we gave you a reallocation of any territory, would you then provide, and you were responsible, would you keep Eagle open? Would you keep Palmyra Eagle Middle School, High School open, or Palmyra Eagle Elementary? And the answer is no. We felt we did not, or we said we do not need to take on that additional expense at this point in time. And hence why we put a number to what we felt the capacity could be of students coming into our district to begin with. We are very proud of our small town community and big time education. Thanks to the vast array of programming we offer toward meeting all students' needs, interests, and passions. We always strive to develop rather than sort talent. In addition, we take great pride in our constant pursuit of keeping the focus on the learner and recognizing that success of a child is much more than 6 scores on just achievement tests. It is our goal to develop learners who develop creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and curiosity while also ensuring achievement of content. Currently, 10% of our teaching staff are nationally board certified, The national average is 3%. About 46.2% of our teaching staff have a master's degree, and we have school psychologists, social workers, counselors, and school nurses available in all buildings. Furthermore, we understand that we would participate in the distribution of the assets and assume the liabilities in a proportionate share as represented by the equalized valuation certified in the transfer, or any other methodology we understand an apportionment board may undertake. We expect this would involve recognizing the use value of the buildings while equitably distributing associated debt. Finally, East Troy can and will accept additional students in our current school buildings. We have recently passed a capital improvements referendum to address our facilities needs, which we believe secures our facilities for many more years to come. A portion of PASD borders East Troy and sits in a relative proximity to East Troy schools, and so incorporating the portion outlined in our attached page, if dissolution and redistricting of boundaries were to occur, represents the educational welfare for Palmyra Eagle students within those areas, while also keeping the interests of the East Troy Community School District in both the short and long terms. Please do not hesitate to contact Dr. Hibner, our district administrator, if you'd like any further information. Sincerely, Ted Zess, Jessica Fuchs, Steve Lambert, Bob Bignan, and Tony Barrett. And so, I think every school board did that one way or another, differently, but that's kind of where it's at. And honestly, if someone were to ask me, I'm not sure where the SDBAB stands. I think some are probably leaning toward not dissolving. Some are trying to say if we dissolve, then what? Kath, what are the 4 options that they discussed heavily on last Thursday? That they didn't even get through all 4, but right now they kind of have broken it down to at least 4, and I think they might be going in the direction of adding a 5th and a 6th and a 7th and 8th. But of 4, do you have them right in front of you?
I'll see if I can get them from memory. So they have 7 facets by law that they need to address, 7 requirements, like what is it going to do to transportation? What's the fiscal effect? What's the effect on economically disadvantaged students? So there's 7 categories that they have to analyze, and they said they're doing it now through 4 different lenses. So they're taking each one of those topics, and they're saying one lens is we do not approve the dissolution. We make Palmyra still exist. Another lens is the entire Palmyra Eagle District goes to Mukwonago. A third lens is that the east side goes to Mukwonago and the west side goes to Whitewater, split by the county line. And the 4th lens is Mukwonago, Whitewater, with East Troy involved in some capacity based upon, we said we could go into that northwest direction a little bit. And to piggyback on your question, or continue with your question, they're supposed to have a decision by January 15th. So if we are out of it completely, then we'll be able to, I think, clearly say at the coffee shop, we got no kids from Palmyra Eagle.
Okay.
The complication a little bit is if we do get kids, when we were costing out different scenarios to try to figure out what to even advocate for, we talked about should we advocate for East Troy, taking on the whole district, that kind of thing. When we did some of those different scenarios, it becomes pretty clear quickly the hugest variable, or what you'd love to ask the kids, is even if they become East Troy residents or Mukwonago residents or Whitewater residents, are you going to utilize your open enrollment out option and go to another district anyway? Because that changes your calculation quite a bit. When I pulled up the file as you guys were talking, I ran 100 students from Palmyra Eagle coming to East Troy. If 50 of them open enroll out, the first year, it causes us to lose an additional $212,000 in our deficit calculation. Like, we're hurt $212,000 more even than our current deficit. Because you gotta think about, the revenue limit formula only gives you 1/3 of a resident per pupil. So like 1/3 of $10,000 in year 1, but you're paying the full amount of open enrollment out, $7,771 currently. So you're losing $4,000 in year 1 immediately in that calculation. So again, but if you run the scenario of gaining 100 residents and nobody open enrolls out, well then in year 1 you have a positive $189,000 against our like $500,000 deficit. So again, does it solve our deficit? You know, our comment we made in the very first presentation was any resident students are good. Any resident students are going to help your population, are going to help the formulas. But then the factors of, again, what happens with open enrollment, it's a large amount of money. It could, in you know, a special education open enrollment student cost more even than what you're getting on the revenue limit formula by year 3. So
And that's another discussion they're having, which they don't even have the authority, and that would be, would they surpass the 1/3 and honor full-time students immediately? So would they be provided, any district that would take a full-time student would take a full-time equivalency right away, rather than 1/3, 2/3 full?
and then if they do that, will they backfill any state aid to help the taxpayer? Because great that your revenue limit goes up, but if we don't have any additional state aid when we are 30%-ish state aided, and if our taxpayers have to pick up all of that, then that's a problem as well. It gets pretty complicated and difficult, but I'm hoping by January 15th, you know, it'll actually help your question to know if we're in or out on that date.
Well, and if we're talking about a swing between a positive 180,000 conceivably or losing 220, the fact of the matter is, the best case scenario still doesn't close
Yes.
the structural
Structural
deficit.
deficit.
Yes.
So that's a great, that's exactly
Yeah.
what I wanted to know.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll see, again, what, you know, once we get maybe even a boundary to try to determine how many kids live in that area and go from there. One other thing, since I'm talking, can I add? If you guys read nothing else in this, I know it's a lot of information on that referendum, items from Corals and Brady starting on page 34, but if you read nothing else, I'm asking if you can take the time to read 34 through 39. It's 5 pages, and I reread it today, and still it's great to like refresh it. There's a couple big points. What can our promotional materials include? What can they not include? And again, you have to think of it like we can give information through mailings. We cannot promote. We cannot say vote yes. We cannot say defeat, reject if we were going that direction. And then on page 36 there's different almost job descriptions of board members versus administrators. What board members are allowed to do and advocate for versus administrators, versus on page 37 if there's any yes groups or no groups, those are called referendum committees. So what they are allowed to do. And then again, you know, after page 39, it gets into all the posting requirements and the ballot requirements, and Chris and I will be handling all of that, and Terry. But, you know, if you can verse yourself a little bit in the 34 through 39 just to refresh, I think it's valuable.
Best thing to just remember is, right, no one during their employment status during the workday, or as an employee, or as a board member status, should be discussing the rationale to vote for something. I mean, discussing vote yes or vote no. Right? You can discuss all the information you want in regards to helping someone to understand, and it can help them to understand why the solution came forward. But there should not be a comment in regards to, well, that's why you need to vote yes, or that's why you should vote no. But as an individual outside of your board parameters, you can absolutely be on a vote yes, a vote no, or be talking about it individually in that way, as an individual, not as a board member. And that just please recognize we are held to a much different standard than that. I've recalled that before in the past with some of our referendums where people be like, why in the world aren't you saying vote yes? I can't. And they're like, are you telling me you're not supporting and you're getting up here doing all these presentations? I go, I'm telling you, I'm trying to help you understand what you need to know toward making a decision. But I can't tell you how to make that decision.
Chris, what you just said, actually, if you read on 36, under 2A, seems to state that board members may speak freely in favor or against referendum.
Yeah, I agree, but I would highly recommend not doing it while being in the role of the board member sitting here.
Okay.
Exactly.
So it should say board members as community members.
Yeah, I would personally tell you that. I mean, due to the fact it goes back to the same essence of someone saying, all right, so I always say, like, copying information, great, right? But if you were to be copying information that had a vote yes on it, I would immediately be going, you're not using the district copier, right, for that? You're doing somewhere else, and you're doing it as an individual member now, not as that board member. So, Tony, I think those are logistics, like, right, but I just always say be careful of the role. I mean, it's, where are you at, where are you speaking, and what's your role right now? Are you Tony Barrett, or are you a school board member sitting up here? And if you're a school board member, I would say, I would be more cautious to be in informational mode, sharing, talking, making someone understand, but not necessarily yes or no. Outside of that realm, free game for all. So anyways, going back, I apologize, Bob, great question, but, so going back to C, and that is, the resolution agenda item is before you. I see Ted has the resolution up in front of him. That's the question tonight, so I think if you guys are considering that, it would take a motion and a second for discussion to happen.
I am comfortable at this time, after all of our discussions, to make the motion to approve the resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed our revenue limit by 1.6 million per year for the next 5 years for non-recurring purposes.
Second? I'll second. All right. Further discussion?
I'd like to say the question, since the board just made a motion, you got a second for non-recurring purposes. In the question itself, it's for, I'm not saying this is part of the thing, I just want to point out what a ballot would look like. It's for the non-recurring, it's for 5 years, beginning in the 2021 school year, just so people are aware and the difference between non-recurring and recurring. The board is electing, when they say non-recurring, they're electing for 5 years.
Any discussion on that motion?
I think we're ready.
All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item is a resolution providing for a referendum election on the question of the approval of the resolution.
I have to read that like
Who wrote
twice,
that?
but when the attorney sent this stuff, I'm like, what, wait a minute, did we just do that? No, I guess we did do that. I guess we just approved that. Oh.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution providing for a referendum election on the question. Resolution. It still doesn't.
No, I'll second
That's
it.
the language they gave us, keep going with it.
I'll second.
All right, discussion on that statement.
Let's get this done.
Can we have that read exactly the way it's written? Due to the fact that it's obviously attorney language. So I would really want to be read exactly the way, so we have the, approval of that.
I will say it again.
Sorry, Ted.
Resolution providing for a referendum election on the question of the approval of a resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limits of $1.6 million per year for 5 years for non-recurring purposes. And Jessica seconded. Any discussion on that? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And now the next item, referendum communication roadmap.
So this is within your packet. As all of you know, a huge component during our referendum. First of all, right, a huge thing during any referendum is it's very emotional, and understandably so. There's a lot of emotions tied to a referendum, and people trying to understand what's the need, what's the process used. Has the district done everything possibly before that? All those things, and then what will be the impacts?
I think a roadmap, as we're getting to, a communications roadmap is always vitally important. While we discuss how we're going to help the community understand what the solution is and what it does and why it was needed. With that being said, within your packets is, and you had it last time, and now there's been an updated version to that roadmap. And so it explains clearly, this started back in November, to be quite frank, whether or not what would have occurred tonight. We started a roadmap of communication, and communications have already started in regards to the process and what's been going on, and that we're meeting tonight for a possible resolution questions for a ballot in April. With all that being said, this designs clearly then delineates the role, some roles of the board members over a course of time, with meeting with different organizations, to administration's role, to when we want to get district flyers out, and when we want to just get communications out to district parents. So we're delineating all that information, and the bottom line is, it is a very comprehensive weekly list of what we're doing all the time, from basically the middle of November already until the vote in April, and actually even thereafter, due to the fact no matter what the outcome of the vote is, there's work to be done after that for communication purposes. So with that, I've asked Joe Donovan of the Donovan Group to come. Joe works as a consultant for our district, and he helped us to design the roadmap. He meets with us weekly on this roadmap and messages and message points. So I asked him to come to speak to you guys and answer any questions you have with regards to it.
Thank you, Dr. Hittner. Thanks for the opportunity to be here and for the opportunity to work with you. And I just wanted to pick up a little bit of what Dr. Hittner said. The work that you have, the roadmap that you have, again, started some time ago. And so the engagement that you've done, it's been a lot. The survey, the task force, that work continues. The conversation continues. I think sometimes school boards say, okay, we're good, we did what we needed to do, and now it's done. And things really continue. This is a conversation. It's a conversation that you started with your community. People now will start really paying attention. Those who maybe hadn't been paying attention very much will so now. And the other thing is, for those of you who were involved in the capital project and the facilities project some time ago, it's very similar. That engagement continues. It's just a little more difficult to communicate about operational needs versus facility needs, right? To be able to point to an outdated facility and say we need to replace that, or because of enrollment we need to add on or replace a building. Operational needs is a much different story, but the process is very similar. Just as with a facilities referendum, I always say that the conversation really kind of falls in three buckets. It's, you have a defined need. You have a process to evaluate those needs that ultimately came up with a solution. And you just, you'll vote on the solution that will go on the ballot today. So needs, process, solution. Before we look at the roadmap, just a couple of things I just want to pick up. Again, we're talking about conversation and engagement, providing community members really good, useful information in advance of the referendum. The work that we do as part of the district, we cannot advocate. Okay, so again, we can't say you should vote yes. Outside groups can do that. Board members on your own time, as you noted, you can do that. We cannot use any school district resources for the purpose of advocacy. So for board members, often what that means, you had mentioned it before, often what that means, if you had a situation where sometimes board members have laptops or iPads or even email addresses, you can't use, those are owned by the taxpayers, and so you can't use those for the purpose of advocacy. So everything has to be done with, advocacy has to be done with private ballots, you can't use public ballots for that. So with that, I wanted just to walk through really quickly at a high level, and very happy to answer any questions you may have about this roadmap that we put together. And again, it's dated November 25th. There were several versions. This has been a work in progress. In fact, this is a living document. And you're going to see that we're putting together information, a website, parent letters, community letters, frequently asked questions. Frequently asked questions are a great tool. And board members, if you have questions, I encourage you to forward those to administration so that they can be added to that as well. Again, I mentioned parent letters, news releases, social media campaign. Again, all built around this idea of sharing information about the needs, the process that you use to evaluate those needs, and the solution that's going to go on the ballot. The other thing that I would say is, as we go into the holidays here, we have a lot of work to do before the end of the year. You know, most of this is ongoing. We're talking and meeting every week. We're talking and emailing every single day. The other thing that I would mention is that there will be a series of mail pieces that will be going out as well, and you're going to see those noted in here as well. And I've been doing this type of work for the better part of a decade and a half, and I'll tell you, community members, especially those that don't have a connection to the school district, want that. They want to have that information from you. And so, again, our work at the district level will be to ensure that people have, when they go into the voting booth, all of the information they need to make an informed choice. Understanding that may be that they're convinced they're going to vote no. And that's okay, as long as we're providing good, useful information for them. So, again, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Looks like a great plan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, ABM multitasking. I'm sorry. And I don't believe in multitasking, so it's overrated. It's not true, by the way. So I think we should get a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the referendum communications roadmap as presented.
I'll second. Discussion? Looks good.
It really does.
All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, review district, schools, state report card, and action plans.
We actually have a presentation. I don't know if you guys want to.
Go over there.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, it's all good, all good.
Oh, you're going to turn around. Okay. Okay, so our last board meeting was November 11th, and on November 12th, the state report cards were released. So this is the first time we'll be talking about them. I have sent out communication, which everyone has reviewed, but this is an opportunity to just dig in a little deeper. Also in your packet is some information that goes along with this presentation. I believe it starts on page 70. So I think first it's important to understand where those state report cards come from. They're founded on the Wisconsin State Assessment System, which is made up of the Wisconsin Forward Exam, administered at 3rd through 8th grade and also 10th graders, the ACT Aspire, which our 9th and 10th graders take, and the ACT with writing, which our 11th graders take. So using the results of those assessments, the state identifies 4 priority areas. There's student achievement, and that's essentially how well do the students do in the areas of ELA and mathematics. There's school growth, which is essentially a year-to-year progress in the performance of students in ELA and mathematics. There's closing the gaps, and that's related to specific student groups. And then lastly, there's on-track and post-secondary readiness, which includes things like graduation rate, attendance rate. For Prairie View, it would include their 3rd grade ELA. You remember back in the day, we used to do the 3rd grade reading assessment, 3rd grade ELA, and for middle school, it would be 8th grade math achievement. So that information essentially serves as the foundation for the report card. So we want to take a look at each school and the report cards that the schools that have received. Each school then feeds into the district report card, so we'll get to that. We start with Little Prairie. You'll notice that Little Prairie does not have a rating on a school report card as typical because state testing does not begin until 3rd grade. So they don't have the data that other schools have. We are required to submit different types of data, and as a result, we have satisfactory progress, which is right where we need to be for Little Prairie. Prairie View Elementary scored at a 79, which exceeds expectations. Things to highlight. So you'll hear me talking about the state test scores, but also the report card. So things to highlight. In grades 3 through 5, students scored above the state average in all subject areas. It should be noted in the area of math, it exceeded the state average by quite a bit. On the report card, Prairie View Elementary was above the state average in achievement, in school growth, and in on-track and post-secondary readiness. Our focus area is in closing the gaps. And when we look at the data, there are essentially 2 student groups that we have to focus on, one being students with disabilities and one being students who are economically disadvantaged. The middle school scored a 58.9, which meets few expectations. With the exception of 8th grade math, students in grades 6 through 8 scored below the state average in all subject areas. On the report card, we were above the state average for on-track and post-secondary readiness. We were below the state average in achievement, school growth, and closing the gaps. Most notable at the middle school in looking at all of the data were the gaps in performance for students with disabilities and economically disadvantaged. East Troy High School, 79.7 exceeds expectations. 9th and 10th grade, students were above the state average in all subject areas. 11th grade consistently hovers around the state average in all areas of the ACT, including the composite. So the composite score was a 19.6, which is exactly the state average. We were like tenths of a point off above or below in all subject areas. So, but the composite was exactly at the state average. Related to the report card, the high school is above the state average in all areas on the report card. So the state then takes all of that information and compiles a community school district report card in which we received a 76.2, exceeds expectations. In 17-18, now remember this is for the year 18-19, we're always a year behind. In 17-18, our school district was at a 76.1. With the exception of district growth, we scored above the state average in all priority areas on the report card.
In the last 4 years, our district has gone up each and every year.
Yes, we continue to go up as a district.
When you talk about the district growth, is that student population or?
Yep, it's growth year to year.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yep, good question. So we have all this data, right? So now what? Well, we consistently use data day to day to reflect on the effectiveness of practices, strategies, and systems. So that is standardized test data, report cards, district assessments, classroom assessments, things like that. And each building already identifies an SLO, which is a school learning outcome. You'll remember us talking that every building is working on one, so all the teachers have they're working as a collective group. And it identifies an area that principals have identified as an area for growth within their buildings. I think it's important, though, that we address the elephant in the room, right, which is the middle school. Because our report cards are really strong, but we have to address the middle school because we know that there's some growth. So we're taking that SLO a step further at the middle school and doing some strategic planning. Now this is something we're talking about for all buildings to do, but we have dug what's already in place, right? In order to know where you're going, you have to know where you've been and what you've already done. So we have got lots of moving parts happening. First of all, let's go back a little bit. 2017, you'll remember that our staff worked on course overviews where they have aligned the state standards to what we're teaching. Lots of times you'll hear people say, oh, are you teaching to the test? Well, that's a really negative statement to say. At times people take that negatively, but the fact of the matter is, if you're teaching the standards, the test is assessing students' understanding of the standards. So if we're teaching the standards, we're preparing students. Now, course overviews are not one and done, right? We did them initially, but now as new standards are released, we're returning to them to do revisions and such. In 2018, we adopted an assessment continuum, which establishes assessment practices for summative, formative, goal setting, and feedback. And the idea is to create a learner-empowered environment where students are involved in the assessment. PD, over the last 2 years, has focused on many things related to instruction, but also to our students' needs relating to trauma-informed practices, creating resilient learners, and building environments of equity. Remember, I talked about those gaps that are in the areas of students with disabilities and economically disadvantaged. We have to create some equity in our classrooms so that we're meeting the needs of those groups as well. We have begun to administer a SABERS assessment, which is a universal screener that identifies students at risk for social, emotional, and behavioral challenges so we can respond to them. If a student is not where they need to be socially and emotionally, they're not available to learn. So we know that we have to address that. In 2018, we established and adopted CPM. CPM is a math program which directly aligns with what our district is about. CPM stands for Collaborative Learning, Problem-Based Learning, and Mixed Space Practice. Then we also established an ELA block, which is a workshop model. So when we did our tour, you saw the ELA rooms. And Mr. Sines talked about the direct instruction that occurs. That occurs at the level of grade level standards. So the instruction students are receiving as whole groups at grade level standards. But it also allows us to identify student needs and fill gaps in what we call strategy groups. So if we have students that have some holes in their understanding, we fill them in during those times. If we have students that are ready for extensions, we fill them in during those times. We also adopted the Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment for the first time in the spring of 2019. It is a reading assessment that allows us to accurately identify a student's instructional level for reading so that we know where we're starting and we can get them reading material that's at their level. Okay, so those are all the things that we've done. We haven't just done them at the middle school. They've been done district-wide. Now this year, like I said, we're focusing on the middle school. We're doing some strategic planning around the middle school. And I want to take this opportunity to introduce you. I don't know if you've ever met Sarah face-to-face, but this is Sarah Eckert. Sarah is the coordinator of secondary teaching and learning. She works very closely with the teachers at the middle school. And she is going to spend a little bit of time talking about this is what we've done, now here's what we're doing moving forward with the middle school in mind.
Thank you. So we have a lot of stuff that's happening kind of thinking like behind the scenes at the middle school. But a lot of, as you said, a lot of moving parts with this and recognizing that one thing influences another thing. So we have a lot of different focuses, but we have a few things that we're really trying to highly focus in on and do really, really well. With the understanding by doing those things well, we're also going to do everything else really well as also. So I don't have a lot of slides, so you don't have to like turn around a lot, you can get kind of comfortable. But I am a visual person, so I can put a couple of visuals on here for you. Really the big thing to keep in mind when we're talking about what we're doing at the middle school, we're trying to ensure efficient and effective systems. So I'm really talking about the systems that are supporting our teachers teachers and then our students up for success. We want them to have a good environment, good systems to really thrive. So that's what I'm really going to speak to is those systems at the middle school. So one of the biggest things that we've done is we've done a lot of work just looking at our teams that we have in middle school. So doing analyses in terms of what are the conversations that are being had, are we having the conversations that we need to be having? We do a lot with data. Are we utilizing data in an actionable way as well? And so we've done a lot of work within our team structures. And I'm really proud that we have, within all of this, a school leadership team that has formed. We really want to not only empower our students, but also empower our teachers. And this leadership team is really working on building their capacity around using data. How do we use it in an actionable manner? They've even gone to a framework training as well to learn about equity and take a real close look at what the reality is in the middle school as well. And we're already creating plans for moving forward to make change. And we'll speak about some of those goals that have come from that team a little bit later on. Within that team as well, we've also identified professional development for staff. So we're really building that ownership of what that looks like within our school. We've also, with that, we've also looked at our team leaders that we have and our PLC. So our collaborative time when our teacher teams come together and they're having those crucial conversations surrounding student learning. And so what we've done with that is we're actually providing more support for our leaders so they can then support our teachers to guide through those crucial conversations surrounding data. And again, seeing those actions in kind of timely manner within the classroom to help our students learn. And we're having really good conversations surrounding that equity issue, those achievement gaps, and how can we ensure that all students are learning at high levels. And so that's what my next slide actually is. This is a key part of kind of what started this with our school leadership team. Wisconsin has come out with a framework for equitable multi-level systems of support. And really what it does is it's a framework, but what it's doing is it's taking all of our systems, putting them together, asking that question again, are we efficient? Are we effective? If we're not, how can we be efficient? How can we be effective? But our goal as a team is to foster that cooperative responsibility to make sure that all students are learning at high levels. And so we want to make sure that when kids leave East Troy, they're out here, they're college, they're career ready, and they're being successful beyond here as well. So that's our goal with that as well. Within that too, we developed our meetings as well, from staff meetings to team meetings, to really be strategically focused on our items that we've identified through data dives that we've done with our staff. So we spent a lot of time just with staff trying to understand what is data telling us, from the report cards to math scores to observations that we're making across the school, understanding what is the picture and then where do we go from here and developing plans from that as well. So we had a really strong focus on the data with that. We also are focusing on relationships this year, understanding that a big part of learning comes from the relationships that students and teachers have. So we're working on training with that, and our teams are also developing that too. One of the things that I love being from the teaching and learning department is getting that chance to be in the classroom, getting to work with teachers, and we do conduct rounds with the principals as well. And we go into the classrooms and we get a chance to provide feedback for teachers and
Before I start here, I think it's really important to acknowledge the work that the Teaching and Learning Department has done within the district. One of the, I think it's a great move on the part of the board and also district office is to be bringing in individuals that are focused primarily on the teaching and learning, because once you start looking at it, that's really the whole point of the process here within the school. So having that group to be able to just support our staff members down and through to the kiddos is a really important component here that not a lot of districts are able to afford. We do appreciate that as being a component here at Destroy. Amy talked before about closing gaps, and that's a priority here. Closing gaps is really is an important aspect, especially with the students with disabilities and also the economically disadvantaged. So to look at that, our school improvement team, during that particular time that Sarah was talking about, when we had an opportunity to go work off-site as a group and look at the data here specifically, we came up with this particular first bulleted goal that we actually presented just recently to the members of our staff here. By spring of 2020, the East Troy Middle School will decrease the percentage of students with disabilities scoring in the 0 to 20th percentile from 58.62% to 50% or lower as measured by the NWA ELA assessment. So we're going to have something that we'll be using our district-wide measure for that from the school map to look at that particular area. Also, Amy talked a little bit about how we scored on the forward here. The middle school scored below the state average in all subject areas, except 8th grade math. The growth component of the middle school was below the state average in both English language arts and mathematics. So that's how rapidly our students are gaining knowledge from one year to the next. So we take a student from last year, from 2 years ago, and look how they did last year, and then they were able to come up with the growth, and that's where we're also going to be looking from that standpoint. And our goal connected to that, by February of 2020, 100% of our East Troy Middle School teaching staff will use critical thinking strategies at least 2 times per week. This goal will be monitored through teaching and learning rounds, critical conversations during PLCs, and staff reflection and self-reporting. So we're looking at teaching strategies specifically to start honing in on the growth components. Finally, we use our school perception survey, and that's something that we have every year that our 8th graders take.
Pete, would it be fair to say that through the data digs, that strategy was identified due to the fact it's an area in which we are lacking from a standpoint of the critical thinking at a deeper level? So when I think of levels, I think of surface level, deep level, and transferable learning. And as we all know, transferable learning is where absolutely the learning needs to get to. And I'm not talking in East Troy, I'm talking anywhere. From a standpoint of kids being able to apply the knowledge and concepts to numerous other multidisciplinary areas. Would you say that that's where that second goal originated from, is we're trying to move from a surface to more of a deeper and transferable learning?
Yeah, here again, that's a good point. From a standpoint of, for the longest time, we need to get through the material. You hear sometimes that start with page 1 and try to get through page 200 over the school year. A lot of times that just basically is surface. It doesn't really get down to the root in terms of the depth that a student might want to go dig deeper into something like that. And plus the fact, like Dr. Hinder has said, the transfer. How can you basically take a concept and apply it to something outside of the environment within school? I think that's really the business of school and developing skills, is how something can be transferred. What's that? Yeah.
The standards as well are not written at a recall anymore. I remember when I was back in school, right, it was recall. Standards are not written like that anymore because we're in an age now where everyone carries around this device and you can get any information at any point in time. However, we have to determine whether or not it's the correct information and how to apply it to what we're doing. So that transfer that Dr. Hinder had talked about. And so we have identified that perhaps we need to go
away from this recall so that students aren't focused just on the facts, but how to apply those facts, because that's how the standards are written now.
Which if I can, sorry, I know this is my presentation, but if I can just go a little deeper than that, and I mean that, and that is, hence the assessment continuum is so important when you look at where we're trying to go with students being able to utilize, we're trying to help them to be better at self-assessment, right? And so that's so critical. So if I can just make it so simple as this, we're trying to help kids be able to identify where is it you need to go via the learning targets, right? The standard. Where is it you need to go? What do you need to learn? And then where are you now? And then how are you going to get there? What are you going to need to do to improve yourself to get to where you need to go? And instead of that being a teacher always talking to the whole classroom about it, we're trying to have students be empowered to learn how to do that. Basically become assessment capable learners. Because it's not only a lifelong skill, that's essential for us to get to transferable learning. That's the point, and that's where my connection. We're never going to get to transferable learning. We won't even get to deep learning if we don't get that assessment component built in and help kids to learn how to do that. Because they're the ones ultimately who need to be able to identify that and figure out the path with us helping them so they understand how, who do I seek, who am I going to seek out to get help with? Who am I going, where are the supports that I need to get help with? And then how do I monitor it myself towards whether or not telling my teacher, I get it, I don't get it yet. And then we need to change some of our practices, to be quite frank, in systems from a standpoint of not yet. We've been an educational culture of kind of on timeline and readiness now. And so you've been tested now, you should get it now let's move on now. And the reality is not everybody does get it at the same time, not even close. So we need to change it to a not yet moment. Do you not yet understand that? Okay, so what are we going to do about that? Do we need to intervene it? Do we need to assist? Can you get yourself out of that with a little proper seek and support guidance? So, and then we need to make sure our systems support that mentality. Because a lot of our systems currently don't support that mentality. They support, let's move on. And you know what? Just work harder the next time. It's not about working harder the next time. It's about, you don't understand this yet. So we need to make sure you understand this. We're not trying to move on. You need to understand this. This is really important. So that's the whole idea about that self-empowerment too. And it's not just a word to say, well, yeah, let's give them more ownership. It's not that. It is not that. It's not about giving kids more ownership. It's about helping kids to develop the strategies necessary so they can identify what they know, what they don't know yet, and how to get there. If I can be so broad as to say, it's taking performance and saying, how do I reach my potential? And I'm going to be blunt with all of you. Nobody can take their current performance and reach their potential without having good self-reflective skills. You can't do it. I think if any one of us says we're pretty successful in what we're doing because we're reaching our potential, I guarantee you're successful at it because you have very, very good self-reflective skills. And that's what we have to work with our kids on immensely. Sorry.
And to help a middle school student to be able to do that is quite a challenge. Any child really across the board. So there's some things that I actually like to see during teaching and learning rounds is we have some observable actions that actually are happening with our teachers in terms of how they are conferencing with their students. Because these kind of ideas have to be taught, they have to be nurtured, they have to be supported throughout the classroom. And we have our teachers basically taking the time to sit down individually, small group, have conferences with them to see where they are they there yet? So these are, and that's part of that assessment continuum we talk about. Everyone thinks assessment about that test. No, it's the feedback that we provide through the conferencing that is actually happening. So there's different components within that assessment continuum that the teaching and learning department basically worked on, put into play, and has been working with all of our buildings on that. So there's some pretty powerful things that are happening, especially when it gets down to the observable actions that our teachers are working with our students on. The last one is probably the key to middle school and well across the board. I got to be careful because I'm a little, in middle school myself here. It's the relationship component. Trusting in relationships. If a person doesn't have trust with another person, it's very difficult to, for them to work with and maybe learn from. So what we do is we look at our school perceptions data, as I said before. We have monthly climate data that are from a survey that we're actually looking at. And what we're doing is that we're actually focusing on the social and emotional health of our students. And this is basically developed as our third goal here. And what we did is, as an entire building, this is our school learning objective, is this last goal here. This is what we're working collectively as a staff. As measured by the 2019 September Climate Survey, the percentage of positive relationships or /connections with at least one adult at East Troy Middle School increased from the school average of 93 to 100% of the time during the 2019-2020 school year. The goal we monitored through monthly climate surveys. Basically, we want to have everybody connected with adults here. It's the bottom line. John Hattie he does a lot of research, and he provides a lot of really strong research-based data and strategies for education. I'm just going to quote him. It is teachers who have created positive teacher-student relationships that are more likely to have the above-average effects on student achievement. So one of the areas is that we're trying to increase the student achievement. So if we start developing the relationships and to nurture those relationships, we're going to have a really good chance to basically increase the student achievement here in middle school. So where do we go? We get to a certain point here at the end of the year here. What we're going to basically do at the end of the school year here is we're going to review the outcomes of our current goals. We have the 3 goals. Reflect on the data as a team, and we'll determine if we need to revise these current goals or establish new goals for the upcoming school year. Do you have any questions?
Question that's not, it's related, sort of. I know in the elementary levels and the primary school, there's a lot of parents involved as far as like classroom help and stuff like that. What does that look like at the middle school level?
It's a great question. Not a whole lot, in terms of that. We do get some help here, teacher, when we have activities after school, throughout the year, we'll reach out. There'll be parents that'll provide support for that and really get involved with some of the activities. Coming in during the school day, we don't have a whole lot of that situation here.
Are there opportunities that exist for that, or does that not fit?
Well, here again, would we have opportunities for that? I don't think we really set up a system at all for that kind of component here to have maybe parents or other community members that come in and say, listen to students read or have conversations with. I do know that right now what we're doing is we're working with the, help me out over there at the district office in the back community. Intergenerational group is where our pupil services is working with them on having, looking at some mentor opportunities for some of our students to work with some adults from the community as well. Here, not very much. And we collectively in the area meet as middle school principals, and it doesn't really happen in other places out there.
It was a thought that crossed my mind. I do know, like I said, in primary and elementary levels, we have a lot of parent involvement, which I think lends itself to the engagement with the students in the schools. And then at middle school, you have that drastic cut where parents aren't involved in the middle school. And then maybe in high school, they're more involved in different clubs and boosters and whatever else on that end. And in middle school, it seems like it might be a critical thing.
Here again, I think that we see a lot of parents really working closely with their own children, supporting them. I think there's the dynamics might take on a little bit different. from that standpoint, so we still, there's still constant communication that we have with parents concerned about their children and how they're doing. I don't know if that's the shift that becomes a little bit more specific to them, and so, it's not like parents disappear, they don't at all. So they're still there supporting the kids.
I'm not saying that
So,
they're not, it's
yeah.
just more of a, parents are more focused on their own child as opposed to
Yeah.
if and when they come in for a classroom opportunity, then they have an opportunity to reach another student, or another student has an opportunity to engage and connect with another adult, which may help them transition in the middle school and be able to connect and engage with other adults at the middle school that are teachers and administrators and staff.
And there's that natural dynamic where your kids don't want you around when you're in middle school. I mean, it's the age. It's the age. They're starting to develop that
This
independence.
is true, but nothing says that you have to go and help your own student. You can go and help somebody else's kids. That's.
And sometimes they like you more than your kids.
Hey man, I've been there.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Any other questions?
Well, I would like to think that the kids that'll be coming into middle school next year, I know, because I have one in 5th grade, they've only known the newer personalized learning from 4K. So I imagine that will only help instill some of the things a little more because they're more familiar than any kid who's been through here yet with all of it. So,
And recently, that's what the students are looking for that. There was that transition component that we had, but now students are looking for and asking their questions or coming and saying, this is how I'd like to show my knowledge. Our kiddos are saying that to our teachers, which is exactly what we want them to say. So.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. If I could just reiterate one quick final thing, and that was what Amy stated, and that is, the administrative team has been talking, and we'll be working on this summer with necessary subgroups and everything else too, but I would like to come forth with next fall's board, as the middle school has been working on strategic plans. We have already been talking about more strategic plans from each building's perspective, so we're going to identify areas and then we'll bring those forth to each of you so you can look at building level strategic plans, and then we'd like to be reporting out on those more, at least maybe quarterly, and then maybe not quarterly, but twice a year, so you can hear feedback and get necessary monitoring of how those goals in each building are going forward.
Sounds great.
All right, next item, approval of the 2020-2021 district calendar.
Jack?
So we're on page 76 of your board packets. And a couple of things on this calendar. All the buildings are going to go trimesters next year, so we won't have like the high school on tries and the rest of the district still on quarters. So that eliminated a lot of markings on the calendar, I guess I would say. It was also a pretty difficult year to get the trimesters balanced because you want that first trimester to end around Thanksgiving, and that's why we pushed one more day to November 24th, Monday, Tuesday of that Thanksgiving week, and then to have the 30th for grades, so that looks a little odd compared to, again, previous years. That still only gives 56 days to the first try in comparison to 57 days in the second try and 59 days in the last try. Other than those couple, and then the beginning of the year. The beginning of the year, state law is that you cannot start school until after September 1st. So we unfortunately couldn't start it like that Monday, August 31st by law. But you also don't want to wait till after Labor Day weekend, September 8th, and lose quite a few days on the front end. We did keep the Friday, the 4th off for traditional county fair days for students. So that's what kind of drove that decision making at the beginning of the school year for this calendar. questions?
So they go to school for 3 days, they're off for an extended weekend? for the
Yep.
3 days? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, again, not ideal. There's a lot of things when you're developing the calendar that you say, oh, this isn't ideal, that's not ideal.
Just random, when did that become a law? Because I remember going to school here, starting at the end of August, when I was
Yep, yep, the September 1st law. It's been a while now.
Been in existence ever since I've been a superintendent. It was in existence when I was principal.
I think it was a Tommy Thompson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So well after.
Yeah, I gotta think, it wasn't long after Veterans Day, I don't think it was.
Yeah.
People always think the law is after Labor Day, so we always get a handful of calls like, why are you starting September 1st? You can't start till after Labor Day. And the law is actually September 1st is when you can start, not, doesn't have anything to do with Labor Day.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the calendar for the 2020 and 21 school year.
I'll second.
Discussion?
Is there any impact on the 56 versus 57, 59 day trimester like proposed?
56, 57, 59 day trimester.
No, we brought this to all the department or the PLC leads, and they were fine with this. We couldn't do the balance like had been done this year perfectly, and it's close enough, I guess. It's not going to have a huge impact
Okay.
on anything, but yeah, it was all brought to the leads.
Okay, I was just curious if it had any impact on it.
Any other questions? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of the 2018-2019 audit report.
Yes, this is just the fun annual approval of the official closing of the books, I guess. So the auditors are always here one day in June for like a preliminary audit. They close what they can close at that time, and then they come for a week at the end of July, early August. And the result is what, I was gonna say what you have in front of you, but it was online in the PDF version because it's around 100 pages long, so we did not print all of that, but again, it was in your online board packets. On page 77, we have a summary of, I think, what the important points are. Fund balance was reported to you, at the end of July. Nothing changed. Sometimes, there's some correction that will need to be made, and if there's a correction, it could change that fund balance increase. But the same number that we reported at the end of July is what stood. We increased fund balance by $255,131. It's slightly down in our percentage of expenditures compared to last year. And reminder, we reserved, of that $255,000, reserved $90,000 for final Chromebook replacement cycle, which we purposely broke up to do over 2 fiscal years to gain the state's Chromebook grant, but the Chromebook grant was eliminated on July 3rd, so it did no good to reserve the $90,000 into the new year, but we didn't know that at the time of doing that. And then we have $120,000 of the $255,000 reserved for the 4-year replacement cycle for Chromebooks. So that leaves us with really putting $45,000 of an increase in the fund balance. And again, fund balance is a difficult concept to understand. It is not a savings account. If it were a savings account, we would not need to short-term borrow. But as I put in that line on page 77, we do have to short-term borrow about $2.9 million every year. There are districts who have a large enough fund balance that they don't have to short-term borrow. So again, if we got to that point, that we didn't have to short-term borrow $2.9 million anymore, which means basically we'd have to add another $2.9 million to our fund balance, then monies on top of those dollars are truly money that can be used for some one-time, again, expenditure. You wouldn't want to use it for an ongoing expenditure because that would, again, replicate the cost unless you had a huge fund balance. But, fund balance, when they talk about that on the top of page 77, it's measured at one point in time. It's the June 30th amount of your assets minus your liabilities. And a good portion of that is the cash that's at the bank. But again, the point that, and why, I'll backtrack a second, why it's measured on June 30th every year is so that you, the board, can see, did we go up, did we go down? You know, it's like a snapshot, the same date, the same time, and you can measure again, did we grow or not? But it would be like taking your own checkbook and picking one random day and taking a snapshot of that amount and saying, well, that's what I have in savings. Well, no, it's not that. I mean, have you paid your bills? What's going on in that particular moment? So by, I would say again, October 15th, we have no money at the bank anymore, which is why we have to cash flow borrow, why we have to short-term borrow, and then the 2.9 million gets us to January 15th when our first taxes are collected. So again, a recap on the top of page 77 about fund balance, because fund balance is on page 8 in the audit report. Then there's a significant section in the audit report that's a lot of notes. I like them. I think they're good notes. They explain, laughing at me, but I like the notes, which is why I pointed out. Pages 30 through 37 is a commonly viewed section of the audit report that refers to other post-employment benefits. What are your retirement liabilities doing as far as health insurance? This was a big deal going back to like 15 years ago. This was a big deal. You hear less about it now, but primarily because a big deal was made of it and people started addressing, much like East Troy did, some of the changes to bring that number down, which was really unfunded. It's a benefit promised to employees, but again, nobody's putting a savings account away for this money that's due if you promise 10 years of retirement health insurance, which again, East Troy does not do anymore. And so you can see that the OPEB liability went from $9 million in 10, 11, 11, 12, down to $3 million we have now. I told you we don't have it anymore, but we still have some people grandfathered, number one. And then there's a very complicated portion that you could read in the notes in the audit report about an implicit rate subsidy. And as long as we allow our retirees to still stay on the district's plan, even if they pay for it themselves, retirees should cost more for health insurance because there's this problem that as you age, you might need medical services more and you cost more. So there's actually a subsidization going on with your active employees if you have retirees on your plan, even if they pay for it themselves, but they pay the same rate. So like again, if our health insurance costs $20,000, and I'm just making these numbers up, but possibly an active's price should really be $15,000 and a retiree's price should really be $25,000. So on things like audit reports, that implicit rate subsidy is actually a calculation that is also an unfunded liability. Let's see, 24 through 30 is a new, well I say new, but it's been there 5 years now, Wisconsin retirement system section that is required to be put in our audit. And literally the auditors wait for that report to come from WRS and then transfer it over into this audit report. Page 47, note 1, budgetary information. So our new auditors, and it's the second year we've had them, our gentleman who was doing it for many, many, many years prior to that retired from school district audits. He still does municipal audits, but he needed, with all, again, the rules only grow every year, so he had to like narrow down, and he decided to not do school districts anymore. But it's interesting now moving to a different auditor, how they do it differently. It's supposed to be, you know, the same, all the same rules, right? But different interpretations, different ways they tackle things. On page 47, there's a note 1 budgetary information. I don't know if you remember, but every July I take to you a little Excel spreadsheet, and I have you approve a budget revision. If we have overspent line item 13000 by $50,000, but we've underspent line item 12000 in our, again, efforts to have a balanced budget. Our previous auditor, under this part of page 47, bless you, if we didn't do that journal entry, he'd do an audit finding that 13000 was over budget by 50,000. So again, I bring you this like budget revision spreadsheet in July, and you'd approve it, and it was essentially like moving expenditures from what was over expended to what was under expended. Our new auditors say that's not a finding. So we didn't have any this year because we still did the audit report, but they said on page 47, note 1 is where they would put that, and they would just note again which ones became over expended, but they wouldn't make it be a finding. So if you'll notice at the bottom of page 77, I'm also asking in the motion tonight if you can approve the 18-19 audit report, and if you would consider, it's up to you, we don't have to, but we could also discontinue year-end budget revisions that had, in my opinion, the sole purpose of avoiding a previously audited finding. And it would save me a couple hours of work in July. Okay? So that's on page 47. Then pages 63 to 64 is what everybody cares about, the findings. You know, how did we come out? We were unmodified, which is good. A qualified modified audit, the reverse, would not be accepted by DPI. Material weaknesses, we had none. Same as last year. Again, our past auditor would always put 2 down. Segregation of duties and, lack of segregation of duties and financial reporting, because the client does not hold a CPA license and prepares the audit papers, and does not prepare the audit papers so that the auditor is truly auditing. And like Ted was at the, oh yeah, I don't know if you were. Never mind, I was gonna say you were at the Palmyra Eagle board meeting.
2 weeks ago.
It was, yeah. DPI presented at one of the Palmyra Eagle board meetings, and they were trying to decide they were doing a presentation on whether there was financial mismanagement of Palmyra Eagle. Is that how they got in this position? And the DPI representative got up and he said, the only 2 findings were lack of segregation of duties and this, again, financial preparation where the client has to hold a CPI license is how, again, our past auditor would understand these and then say that's not true, so it's a finding, okay? And the DPI person went on to say, I can't remember the exact percentage, but 80% of districts all get this finding, the lack of segregation of duties and the papers not being prepared again by a CPA. And it is interesting that our current auditors, though, Wegner, have said we don't see those as findings. It's just different values, different ways they're interpreting it. Again, lack of segregation of duties could be that you have one person depositing the money at the bank, another person writing the receipts, another person balancing the checkbook, another person, that's again how the DPI person explained it at the Palmyra meeting. You'd have to hire 10 people in your office to have the proper, on the books segregation of duties, and most districts decide can't afford that. We'll just take the finding. And as far as the financial, again, my old auditor said, you don't have a CPI license, you can't prepare your statements. The new auditors are saying, you pretty much prepare, we use all the numbers, you don't have to have the CPI license in our book, you're pre-prepping the statements, and then we are just auditing the statements you prepare. So, differences, and if we ever change auditors again, maybe we'll get back to ones that are more, strict with the guidelines than Wegner appears to be on those 2. So non-compliance material, no, none found. I wrote there if I had willfully erred with federal funds, for example, that would have been noted under that section. Then 4 through 8 repeats the same kind of testimony, but they call it a single audit, which is auditing specifically the grants you receive. If you receive more than 750,000, and each year they pick randomly like 2 grants to go into a lot of detail with. They have interviews with myself and with whoever runs those grant programs. I think this last year it was IDEA, which is special ed, which is Kate Harder had to be interrogated, and then food service got picked on, which is Ruth Bentley. So same thing, they go in and they ask a lot of questions about how we run things. Number 9, low risk auditee. We, again, have been labeled yes with our previous auditor because we had those findings. We had those lack of segregation of duties, and the client is not a CPA preparing their own documents. So this year and last year, we switched to be now a low risk auditee. The previous auditor, in his defense too, he said it's no big deal what you're labeled here, yes or no, because all it does is I have to look at a greater share of the federal programs, which I do already. So like that was his stance. Doesn't matter. And then for my own protection, I just put everybody as not a low risk entity. So those are some of the changes again between one auditor and another that I'm seeing, and some of the conclusions that are changing. Any questions you have for me?
So the low risk auditee status doesn't impact our credit rating, it doesn't, okay.
Yep, nobody's asked, like on a Moody's credit report, which way that's fallen, so no. Not that I'm aware of, anyway.
And on the state retirement system, the calculations and things they gave you, when they're projecting, let's say 7% as an expected return, that's all numbers that they are calculating on their own. We are not getting into the weeds there at all?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Correct. Yep. We
How much
basically take Wisconsin Retirement Systems report and put it into the audit.
They didn't show their math for us, did they?
No.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the audit as presented.
If you're okay with me eliminating budget revisions at the end of the year.
Okay, so let me restate that. I will make the move to accept the audit report as presented and to discontinue the year-end budget revisions for the sole purpose to avoid a previously audited finding.
I'll second. Thank you.
Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
Next item, approval of human geography course proposal.
Yes, so in front of you, you have a course proposal that begins on page 82.
83. So back when I was talking about the course overviews, talking about how it's not one and done when standards are revised by the state and returned to them, which is happening right now for social studies. So the state has released new social studies standards that will become part of the state assessment system in 21. So in order to prepare for that, teachers across the district this year during in-service are digging into the new standards and doing an audit of the course overviews that we currently have to compare, to identify are there gaps that exist, where are they? And this course proposal is coming from that process. So right now, currently, our 9th graders take global studies. So you have a choice. You can do global studies or you can do AP human geography at 9th grade. But what we found in doing the audit is that the new standards go deeper into geography and how geography affects cultures and manufacturing and all of that good stuff. And that is not in our current course offerings. So the proposal is to eliminate global studies and replace it with a straight human geography, which actually merges Wisconsin standards, so it's hitting hard geography, but also political science, behavioral sciences, and some economics are in there. The essential understandings are listed. Again, they relate very closely to global studies. They just go deeper into the geography portion. And it's a foundation for the entirety of social studies. The positive is that everyone in our social studies department is licensed to teach this particular course. It's a broad field, so we don't have to worry about staffing for that. The only cost that would be associated with it would be new textbooks. How we see it positively impacting is we've been seeing the AP Human Geography numbers kind of go down. What we're thinking is going to happen is if students take human geography and are interested in it, they will have an opportunity to take AP at a later date, so they can take an additional AP course as a 10th, 11th, or 12th grader. We don't see any discrimination issues. Like I said, it's in place of global studies, just serving as a revised version of that course to include the new standards. And that's about it. It's pretty straightforward.
Would an AP one have different material than the?
Goes a little deeper, like that transfer that Chris was talking about. So it goes a little deeper in what students, but if this would serve as a foundational course, so someone who may not be interested in taking an AP may feel more secure after taking the foundation human geography. So, which is what we always want. We want all kids to have that experience.
So the AP Human Geography, is that still from 9th to 12th grade?
Yes.
They take that?
Yep.
Okay.
It is year long, but that's 2 trimesters. They think of it that way. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Which gets a little goofy because you check year long, but it runs 2 trimesters. So I'm still getting used to that myself.
She just said it.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I don't think so. I'll make a motion to approve the Human Geography course as proposed.
Any discussion? All in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, overnight field trips.
Right, so in front of you, this is Bill Ray Felton is working on this field trip right now. This is obviously to France. So it's for the summer of 2021, so she's really trying to get out in front of this as far as possible, because obviously one of the things you'll notice is that there is a decent price tag along with it, so that they're going to have time to fundraise and work on the different finances on that. It's going through an incredibly reputable tour guide service for the students through France. Everything she included in here. She has what are basically the contract that will also be going through that, so everything is really tight. So once this gets approved, she's ready to start going with the students, make sure that she has the right amount of numbers, and then start fundraising and working to make sure that students have the money to be part of this trip.
Looks good. I'll make a motion to approve the field trip presented.
I'll second.
Any discussion? No. All in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Mark.
So the band was going to go to Florida, and then they didn't have enough interest.
Then they were going to go to Nashville, and that was a little too pricey. So here comes Chicago. So this is their third proposal for band. But they promised me that this is it for the overnight field trips. But Mr. Hummel has done a nice job talking to all of the kids. The price tag for the other two was significantly more. If you go to the last page, let's start there, because it seems to be the deciding factor. If they put 4 in a room, it's $549 per child to go for spring break, so that's nice. They're gonna go down, if you take a look at the itinerary, they go to Northwestern, they start there for a clinic, and then they head to downtown Chicago, watch the Blue Man Group, and do another performance in the theater. So the itinerary is laid out. It's a little bit shorter of a trip, but length and cost is a little prohibitive to some students. So we're trying to be as inclusive as possible, and it's still very valuable experience.
I'll make a motion to approve the field trip request to Chicago.
I'll second.
I'll second.
Any discussion on that one? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Notice of school board election.
Just really quick, notice is hereby given that an election will to be held in East Community School District on Tuesday, April 7, 2020. The following office is to be elected to succeed the present incumbents listed. The candidates receiving the highest number of votes will fill the regular term for election and serve a 3-year term beginning 27th of April 2020 and ending the 4th Monday in April 2023. Current school board member up for re-election is Stephen Lamberts for a 3-year term. Okay.
Leave of absence request.
That'll go into executive session since it's personnel.
All right, reports. Kathy, anything else you want to cover?
No. Oh, you got binders today, which we will periodically give you any new referendum type messages or communications that are produced.
Are we supposed to give these back to you, or?
No, they're yours.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, they're yours. And the whole idea is to assist you guys, as we know, questions come regularly, so to assist with initial messages, assist with possibly a fact. And if there's something that's brought up, our goal is hopefully maybe say, I'll get back to you. Hopefully the binder has it. If not, obviously we can work through it together. I told Bob the other day when we were talking, if you're getting questions and you feel it's a frequently asked question that will come about, please let us know, because we'll just keep adding to our FAQs too, so that then we can always reference back to people to the FAQs.
All right, Amy, anything tonight? Okay, Kate?
Back up there. Back up there.
counselors, and a lot of times is co-taught with counselors and the classroom teachers. So it covers a lot of different things. So I don't know that I need to read through this whole list, but really teaching kids how to handle emotions, how to deal with conflict, and handle things more positively, reading the emotions of others, and how all of our feelings and behaviors can impact other people. So that's what starts at the preschool and kindergarten modules. And then grades 1 through 5 go on establishing rules and really working on self-control and encouraging kids to be reflective about how their behavior might impact each other and those emotions. One of the things that we really liked about the PATH curriculum was that it integrates with Common Core and that it has some nice, it says here, using literature to discuss and promote pro-social behaviors. So it gives examples of books and other sources that can be used to really address standards at the same time. So the state, Wisconsin, has not SEL standards, but kind of some guidelines of what kids should be doing at different ages, and it takes all of that together with Common Core standards. So more of that is handled in the grades 1 through 5. It does go up to grade 6, so the grade 5 module is grade 5 or 6. We're not currently using it at 6th grade. So another thing that is done elementary, really primarily at Little Prairie, is called Counselor's Choices. So Counselor's Choices is something that school counseling brings into classrooms, and teachers use this probably even more so than the past. And it helps kids understand the difference between small problems and big problems. Because like when you're little, everything seems like a big problem. So trying to kind of get through the weeds of that and understand better, okay, this feels big, but is it a big problem or is it a small problem? It's been really beneficial for kids to understand that. And that's where teachers use it a lot on day-to-day with kids too, that when they're coming to them with problems, that they're able to do that. So this was a picture I snapped just from the hallway at Little Prairie. You might have seen them if you've been around, that there's posters up to help kids remember, and it's used a lot throughout the time. That they spend in lots of different areas. So this one was actually from the cafe area that I snapped a picture of. And then it does get used too, so sometimes we have smaller group situations that might come to a counselor or other people service team member, and so sometimes if they're addressing conflict between peers, they might bring out counselor's choices as well. Okay, I think I have to actually click on this link. So what is emotional self-regulation? This is a little video clip of some of our kids.
Friends, what is self-regulation?
Focus, control our feelings, manage our behavior.
Okay, so really being able to monitor and manage our own behavior, being able to regulate ourselves, and so kids are working on that all the time. And that the little emotions that they were showing, those are some cues that are used for them to make that a more integrated part of what they know and do all the time. But it is developmental in nature, so we all need to learn how to self-regulate, and sometimes some people need a little more help with it than others. Regulate. Okay, so one of the tools that we're using to work through self-regulation is the zones of regulation. This, in the past, has been something that we've done with certain groups of kids, maybe as like a targeted intervention, but it's becoming something that we're doing universally. So pupil services are working with teachers on teaching the zones of regulation. So that's another picture I snapped from Prairie View, one of the little rooms there where kids learn about the green zone, red zone, yellow zone, and blue zone. It is different than the classroom management. Sometimes some teachers use different colors to have a classroom management system. It is universally done for K through 5th grade, and we're starting to implement more of that 6th through 8th grade instructionally. the other zones some tools or strategies that you can use to get back to the green zone and being ready to learn. One of the tools that we are working to provide are regulation stations. So through Title IV funding this year, we are targeting mental health and socio-emotional learning, and one of the ways that we're doing that is having regulation stations in classrooms. So we're working over the course of this year and having regulation stations in all of the elementary classrooms, and I think it'll be all of them here at the middle school too, right? Yeah, so what that looks like might be a little bit different from one classroom to another, but like baskets of things that they can use, and the kids are taught how to go into the regulation station if they need to. They can use the tools and then get back to learning so that they don't have to leave the classroom to, say, take a break or things like that. And they can get back ready to learn. Kids are finding it very beneficial, so we had like a pilot, if you will, of some classrooms before, and some of the current 6th graders have that as 5th graders and have said, like, when are we going to get these regulation stations here? So they're asking for it, and they found it very beneficial.
Kate, question off the, just from the board's perspective too. With the self-regulation and all the different supports and resources we're attempting to provide with that, would you say from Director of Pupil Service lens, from a national perspective, from a state perspective, and from an East Troy perspective, that mental health I don't want to put the term crisis on it, but mental health is becoming a very large issue with the trauma that we're beginning to see with kids?
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about trauma, but I think nationwide, they would say epidemic proportions of mental health concerns, from anxiety and depression probably being some of the more major ones that we see. ADHD is certainly up there, and lots of things, and trauma being a part of that too. Because I think sometimes when people hear the word trauma, they think, oh, it has to be something like this major thing, but it's major to them. So how anyone experiences a traumatic event, it may or may not greatly impact them. So it could be moving, could be a traumatic experience for one person, but it might not be for another. Divorce, homelessness, like loss of a parent's job, any of those things can all be trauma. And so we talk a lot about adverse childhood experiences, and those adverse childhood experiences, like those traumatic experiences, are actually a better predictor of later physical health difficulties. So like cardiovascular disease, it is better predicted by the number of adverse childhood experiences than any other risk factor, including genetics. So, yeah. So why do we have regulation stations right in the classrooms? It limits the amount of time that they're out of that instruction. They can go in, they can regulate, and come back out without having to be out. And they're learning those skills so they can do it independently, and they're not relying on an adult to help them get back and ready to learn. Amy and Pete, they talked about the SABRs a little bit. So this is a universal screening that we've started. We do it 2 times annually. It's something the teachers complete, and it looks at risk for social behavior, risk for academic behavior problems, and risk for emotional behavior problems. We do this twice a year, and it leads to class, small group, or individual level interventions. So we take all that data and we look at, okay, what percentage of kids are at risk in this classroom? Do we need a classroom level intervention, or is it a handful of kids and maybe we need a specific intervention? How can we best get the resources and supports to them? I don't have the specific data up here, but real positive is we've already seen from the first screening last year to the screening this year a reduction in the need for some of those class-wide interventions. So already getting some of those supports to the teachers about how to respond to those needs has been really beneficial. The middle school and high school, we've started dipping our toes into, it's called dialectical behavior therapy, skills in schools. So it helps adolescents specifically manage emotional situations so that they can cope with stress. We've talked about the stress that a lot of, especially into high school, that kids feel. they can manage that and deal with those emotions. So it works through mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. So right now, we've been doing this as a selected or targeted intervention at middle school and high school levels, so that's small groups. The nice thing about DBT is that it doesn't matter kind of what your issue is. So when we first started learning about it, I heard the example of like, you know, I might be somebody who wants to ask somebody else out on a date, but I'm really anxious about that, right? And then this other kid might be someone who doesn't get their homework done or doesn't focus well. They can still be part of the same group, working on those same skills, and they hold each other accountable. So they can say, hey, how's your goal on asking someone to the dance? How's that going? And so they really work to hold each other accountable rather than adults doing that. It is designed to be taught universally. So we've started having some initial discussions of, is this something that we should integrate into our core curriculum for everyone? Too Good for Drugs is universal instruction, starts in 4K, goes through 8th grade. It includes a lot of different skills there, so I think the title sometimes sounds like, oh, it's just about drugs, but it's much broader and far-reaching than that. So a big part of it is the goal-setting skills and making good decisions. And so that is something that all kids get for a few, 4K through 8, so quite a few years, a little bit each year. Suicide prevention and intervention. So we have signs of suicide that is conducted universally at the high school. So that helps kids understand how to recognize and report to others when they might have concerns about their friends or themselves. And that's at grade 9 that they get that, and then we do a booster in grade 11. And then also, the sharing of that SAFERS data, we use the OYRBS, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, with staff to increase understanding. There's also resource lessons that are being done to encourage kids to understand how to use that suicide text line, and then running other groups at all of the buildings really, but stress and anxiety groups and suicide and other threat or risk assessments are done anytime we become aware of a concern regarding suicidality or other threats. So a little bit more about the adverse childhood experiences and trauma-informed care that I referred to. So we started training staff in this information in August of 2017, and then we've been continuing that training with staff over the last 3 years. So it's about developing an understanding of what kids are going through, but it's also providing resources and supports for staff because of how they might experience what's called secondary trauma. So when you're working with people who might have experienced a large amount of trauma, you can yourself have kind of a secondary trauma or need for self-care. So we talk about self-care with that. We also, this year, like all the districts in our county, have a partnership with the county called Handle with Care. Sorry, not with the county, local law enforcement. The county led the initiative. What that is anytime a child or minor under 18 has some kind of usually police-involved event or something that happens in the home. So it could be a fire, it could be a domestic disturbance, it could be drugs, whatever it is. Then we get an email from local PD telling us that to just handle that child with care the next day. So that goes to our SRO, it goes to social workers, and it goes to me, and then we make sure the pertinent buildings and staff get the information to kind of give that student a little more TLC that day and beyond. Okay, I have another clip about kind of where we're going with discipline and restorative practices.
Hello. We are public school educators and students in New York City looking for something different.
Across the country, school districts are changing the way they're talking about and dealing with discipline.
3.5 million public school students are suspended from school at least once in a school year. Out-of-school suspensions correlate closely with the lower test scores and higher dropout rates, which have much to do with one's ability to make a living and to stay out of the criminal justice system.
Reflecting a host of issues such as segregation, biases, and prejudice, as well as trends in educational policies that de-emphasize social-emotional learning, adult responses to student misbehavior often lead to racial disparities in punitive discipline and student push-out. Student misbehavior often occurs because of an unmet need, which leads to miscommunication and teachers getting frustrated removing the student. This leads to greater unmet needs, unchanging behavior, and no real accountability or change relationships.
So, how to end the disparity in our school suspensions? Well, you could just end out-of-school suspensions altogether.
Restorative justice is something that many schools are embracing as an alternative to suspensions and other form of punitive discipline.
But what is restorative justice, really?
Restorative justice is helping me find my place in a school community and getting support from my classmates and teachers.
Necessary to show my students that they matter. More meaningful than just being sent home. Rooted in the needs and values of individual schools, restorative justice is about building a community, repairing relationships when conflict happens, and supporting everyone to be accountable to one another. Restorative justice is not a prepackaged program you can pour into a school.
And it's not just sitting in a circle and singing.
Restorative justice is about a cultural shift that can include a variety of community building, conflict resolution, and de-escalation practices like circles, mediations, formal restorative conferences, mentoring, and leadership development that can be led by any member of a school community.
Restorative justice teaches people new skills. Restorative justice helps people mature.
So, what do we each need to move forward from this situation?
I just really need Ms. Jones to listen to me.
Thank you. And I'm sorry about what's happening with your sister. I never would have known that if we didn't come here today. So for future, if you need to check in with her, just send me a note and I'm happy to let you go to the office to call her.
Restorative justice is for every school that can benefit from a shift toward reflective culture for teachers and students.
Restorative justice is not replacing suspensions with the newest buzzword. It's not an experiment on black and brown young people, and it's not a trendy new discipline mandate from above.
It's like they don't know how to connect.
All right, everybody. You know the district says we can't suspend anymore, so here are your manuals. Take a look at these over the weekend. Starting Monday, we'll be doing restorative justice. Got it? Good.
So that kind of takes it to some extremes, I think, but just kind of where some of the pupil services are and trying to work through some of the conflicts and things that kids sometimes have, to have it be more of a practice where they're working together to come to a common solution. And like Pete and Amy had talked about, and Sarah in their presentation, to really building that community so that everyone can be engaged and have the problem-solving process together. So those are things that we're hoping to move more towards that direction, because we want kids to learn how to change the behaviors so that they're better able to address them in the future and that we have less of that need. So this kind of outlays some of the restorative practices about those relationships between educators and students, those common understandings, and holding each person accountable for their actions. So if somebody does something to wrong someone else, then they have the person who was wronged has the ability to then say how it impacted them so that they can opportunities to go and learn about different impacts, things that are, like there's upcoming trainings on drugs, there's some on when kids turn 18, and just lots of different opportunities for educators and parents. And then we do handouts and newsletters all the time too. So future plans and considerations, that things that we're kind of talking about and looking into. Of course, we're going to continue to work with the county and other local agencies to support families. We're looking at hosting an adolescent mental health training through our Department of Justice grant for school safety. We are looking at expanding savers to include student reports where they would be able to fill out their own report about how they're feeling rather than just a teacher rating. One thing that's been a discussion is whether we should be partnering with the community mental health agency to bring those kind of ongoing therapeutic services into our schools to try to mitigate any barriers that kids might be having in terms of accessing those services. I mentioned expanding DBT lessons, that we could make that more universal. So we talked about as part of the health curriculum or other parts of the curriculum, that might be a consideration at the middle school level primarily. And continuing to look to other intervention tools, potentially doing more training or having staff training or restorative practices, sources of strength, youth mental health first aid, and others. So just one final quote, that emotional learning is not a quick or easy lesson. Many adults never master it, but practice makes better. The more practice young children get, the better they will be able to express their emotions and control their behavior. So that was a lot about everything we're doing in terms of socio-emotional learning. Any questions or comments about anything that I have that you want us to, directions you would like us to look into?
I did have a question. You had your science of suicide that you primarily teach to like freshmen and juniors. Is that something you'd ever consider bringing, just sort of touching base on in the middle school?
Yeah, so I should be clear. That is a program from SAMHSA, the Mental Health Association nationwide, and that is a program designed for high schoolers. So that one is for high schoolers. They also have like a science of self-harm, which we've looked at too, and that is not available for the middle school level. So it's not that we're not doing things for suicide prevention at all levels and suicide awareness. It's just that specific curriculum we're only doing right now at the high school. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, I think it's important. The earlier we teach some of those preventative skills. Middle schoolers are really good too at, we do a lot of, not me, but the counselors do training for the kids as part of the teaching that they're doing with them on how to report a concern on our website, and they're really good at doing that, as well as coming to people's services when they're concerned about their friends as well. So, yeah.
Is there any data from our perspective, from you guys, that you would want us to be thinking about, that you would like to have brought forth, that would assist you on the social emotional learning component in regards to anything going on at the school levels that you would like as a report occasionally?
I mean, I like
And you can
this.
think about that longer if you'd like, but I would really like to have you think about that, and if you want to take a little time on it, that's fine, if you have something off the top of your head. In fact, I think that would help from our perspective to know what to bring forth, and maybe us to help focus it too. So I don't know if you're ever having, concerns brought forth from a community member to what you have yourself, but any certain data that you would like us to collect and analyze and put forth.
It's nice to know what is all happening as far as like what's going on with the social emotional learning. I don't know that there's like a measurable component that we need necessarily to see, but it is really nice to hear all of the different things that are happening district-wide and then building by building. It's nice to see that.
I mean, certainly the Savers is meant to be one way that we can kind of assess student-specific risk, but also see the impact of some of the things that we're doing already and things that we've started to do, because the pass is meant to really address a lot of that as well, so.
And I suspect, going back to Mr. Science presentation, point 3, talking about the connections between adults and students, I don't know which specific measurable points. You could routinely go out and measure effectively, but I think that as you look at performance within the schools and you know, being able to measure that connection in the monthly survey to say, okay, do you now feel like you have somebody you can go to, we have a strong connection with? I mean, the great thing about the work that's being done by People Services, but the sad thing overall is that, I mean, I think back to when my mom was on the school board a long time ago. These weren't conversations you had to have, and this is becoming every bit as important as everything that's happening on the curriculum side. So, yeah. I mean, I think as we look at things like test scores, as we look at truancy, as we look at, you know, talking about the tour we had tonight, out-of-school suspensions versus other ways to deal with things. Maybe it's simply going back and measuring things like, okay, first semester 2019-2020, how many out-of-school suspensions did we have at the middle school level? How many did we have in the second semester? I guess that's where, I won't speak for the other 4 people up here, but I don't feel like I'm qualified to begin to say these are the pieces of data that really tell the story. But I mean, I think there are things out there, and it'd be great to get updates on those, because I think it's very easy sometimes for people that don't get a chance to come and hear this to not fully understand just how critical this has become.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of the lens that we have to view everything through. I mean, I would argue it's probably more important than the actual curriculum, because if you can't address these things first, you can't ever get to the learning of the academic content. So, yeah.
But I think with how much more it has become prevalent, the shifting of where our resources even have to occur.
Yeah.
Or I'll be point blank when we're talking about, as the board just approved of a resolution tonight for 1.6 million. We're talking about structural deficits and everything else. I mean, when people discuss, when they hear the word oftentimes, well, let's maintain it. Let's maintain it like it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Like that should be our goal, right? Maintain. The educational, along with the world, along with everything else, continues to shift. And so maintaining, you can't say let's maintain, it shifts. And the needs are different now than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And this is one example of how those needs have shifted.
You have to be able to adapt to the needs of your community if you're going to be successful. And for our district to be able to do that in terms of going back to when we were children, this wasn't a conversation, and now it is for our children. And it's great. We have to do this.
Yeah. And I mean, there are costs associated to really all of it at some level. So I mean, even a community partnership with a outside therapeutic agency, you know, if we were to enter into one of those partnerships, if there was no other way to fund it, you know, we have to have agreements about what that would look like. You know, whether if someone doesn't have insurance, if they're not able to pay, do they not have the right to that? You know, so there's lots of nuances to that, whether it's our own staffing or purchasing more resources or entering those partnerships. There's always some level of costs and things associated with it too.
And legislators have been talking about it, which I'm happy about. I mean, oftentimes, and it's no insult, but oftentimes, sometimes there's, you know, it's a challenge, right? There's a lot of intricacies. I get it, things are interrelated. But legislators have been very much recently talking publicly about the need, right, to assist more in the social emotional learning, and that there needs to be more assistance and funding for the new needs that are being obviously very evident today.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you, Kate. All right, I have no report tonight, so the next item is policy review and development.
Yeah, it's just one first reading, so actually what I would like to do tonight is just hand it out for review. In fact, we got a second reading and a final reading. But very quickly, I asked Bob a while ago, and he's been putting some time into it, and we've gotten to the point where we're like, okay, let's give it to him, even though it's very much a draft. But it's a proposed key control policy for operational protocols. And when we say key, please understand, it also has Bob notes in there, it means Bob as well as keys. But it's primarily the first paragraph above would be your policy. Really everything else underneath that, 1 through, and it's actually 1 through 9. I noticed it went from 6 to 8. I'm not sure what happened to 7, so I think it's 1 through 9 actually. But that would be an administrative rule. And so those would be more of the operational side of that policy. So even though you would approve of it all, the major part is you're saying, look, we're approving of a protocol. And then the administrative rule would be things that we would make sure are always conducted appropriately. We wanted to have something in writing that is much more clear and delineated in regards to what's the responsibility in issuing out a fob or a key. And if one were to lose the key or fob, then everybody understands there's a responsibility and ownership to it. And there is no doubt within here, more of the shift has gone to the building and grounds. Not all of it. Some of it's still at building level, administrative assistants, but the building and grounds director or administrative assistant within that area will be very much responsible now for the oversight of fobs and keys. So it's just a first reading, like I said, but take a look. If you have any questions or a comment, feel free to email it back to me and I'll make those necessary changes come for the second reading.
Sounds good. All right, communications announcements.
I have none. I just reiterate what Silas said. He went through many things, but I had a chance to go to the concert on Sunday. I'm amazed. I mean, I don't have a single, I can't sing at all, so I'm quite amazed when anybody can do it. More or less solos and everything else. So really enjoyable. I mean, really, really enjoyable. I even was kind of singing on the side, but very quietly. But yeah, it was a good thing to wonder.
All right, future items. Anybody have anything from the board?
I actually have 2 things, and it follows up with an email that I sent to Dr. Kipper. 2 items as we were kind of talking through the referendum and just kind of generally coming back to community support again. One was floating the idea of potentially shifting the Monday evening that we meet for board meetings so that we have a better opportunity to get out to some of the municipal meetings in the area as we're going out and talking about the referendum, and just generally so that we're able to connect a little bit more with some of the local municipalities. So maybe instead of doing the 3rd Monday, maybe if there's a way we can adjust it. I think we need to probably look at it based upon when we need to improve things like expenditures and receipts. But that's one thing that I would like to have a conversation about. The other is one of the objectives we talk about on our district website is our partnerships within the community, and specifically our business partnerships. And I would just love to hear an update at some point in the next couple of months, just kind of where we stand on that. Because as I was at the concert on Sunday and walking down to baseball practice afterwards, there's a nice new sign up that has all the partnerships listed. And clearly there are a lot of things going right there. And I think that sometimes we need to do a better story, or we need to do a better job telling the story of what's going right as a way to expand those a little bit further. And again, as we start kind of talking about how that parlays then into the discussion around the referendum, I don't think a lot of people in the community really understand everything that's out there, not just ways that they can use the district to go see a football game, to go see a concert, but also business within the community and within the surrounding communities, what the options are to partner with some of our tech programs, to partner with some of our students. So we can put that on, it'd be great.
That's a good idea. That'd be nice. adjourn to executive sessions or discussion of leave of absence request as provided under 19.851B and 19.851C.
Second.
Roll call vote. Steve?
Yes.